The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath is early 60s novel. It actually came out before her tragic death in 1963, the year that same year that it was like right around when that happened. And it is a very, I want to say it's like a roman à clef, because it's like partially autobiographical, and it's drawing like a lot of elements from Plath's own life and her own struggles with going through like depression and deep, not just any kind of depression, but like a deep, actual, like tormenting, clinical kind of depression that required at the time to go through like this electroshock therapy. And one can only imagine that in the 50s or 60s, this was probably quite, it kind of like in its infancy. Like I'm gonna say it's like that the kind of, I mean, it wasn't so bad that it was like the late 1800s where like anybody who was slightly mentally ill was thrown in like the same kind of, kicked on the same kind of asylum without any, differentiation, or like anybody really caring. They just kind of wrote them off. But like I think like in the 60s, it's like, I don't know if Plath got the best treatment for it. I mean, you have certain doctors that kind of told her to, like, certain things like that were a bit like, like you have to just see a silver lining, or just certain things like that. Not those exact words, but it's certain people who didn't quite understand the depth of her depression, and like that it was, I think, more so existential. So yeah, the Bell Jar concerns a young woman by the name of Esther Greenwood, who is a kind of stand-in, I suppose, for Sylvia Plath herself, and has a lot of similarities. And she is a student of literature, I believe, in Boston, and she has won like this scholarship kind of thing, like a kind of I want to say it's like it's like a summer job. Yeah, it's like a temp job for her to like edit for like this magazine, and it's like a I think it's called Ladies' Day magazine, and she has a good friend named Doreen as well, who is probably everything kind of. Doreen's like kind of like, she's like looks pretty. She finds that Doreen's like kind of like what she looks up to, like kind of like prettier, like natural, like better kind of person. It's a little bit like less moody and stuff, and she's like, if she's like kind of always kind of looks towards her longingly at her friend Doreen, and they both are interested in literature too. And then I want to say there's this other man by the name of Buddy, who's kind of she is very infatuated when she's younger, but as she grows older, she kind of loses. There's a moment of kind of loss of innocence and a rite of passage that everybody goes through, especially like college age is kind of like people lose their sense, like a sense of like high, when you kind of like put people up on a pedestal. Like I think like it was like the reason for this was that Buddy was like no longer a virgin or something, and then she was like, oh, like he's not like the man I thought I was, like like he's not like standing up to this image that I had carved out, and that I praised him for. And like now she's like kind of a little bit like wary of him, but like at the same time she like goes to him for like comfort and like emotional support, because he really is like like studying to become a doctor. He's like very nurturing and like just naturally like a kind of shoulder for her to cry on a lot. And it's like an interesting, confusing kind of relationship, because you don't know to what extent is it a romantic. It seems like almost like a little bit like almost like a the way Prince Michigan in a way loved Nastasia Filiponova was like this. It wasn't ever a romantic love, interestingly enough. But this the Bell Jar goes through a lot of the kind of like starting from, I want to say, over the course of like maybe a few years, I suppose, throughout college, and like her after college. I think this is having a English major, and she's quite studious too. Like Esther Greenwood is very well versed in like all these things, and then over time it's kind of showing the arc of like her loss of like will to do anything. It's like an inertia, like it's kind of a catatonic kind of losing that ambition, that streak of wanting to do anything, like wanting to achieve anything, and it's like she just loses that. And there's a part that I really love where she gives this analogy of the fig tree, I think, where she talks like, and I can't remember the quote word for word, but it was something like one of the fig trees, like she thought it was like she's in like her life she saw a fig tree. You can probably look it up quite easily. It's probably one of the more probably like well-known quotes of the book, but she's like says that she saw before her life was like a fig tree, and that one strand like showed her becoming like kind of like an editor for a magazine, a prestigious magazine, and then another saw her being more of a humble kind of housewife kind of role, and just like living with maybe Buddy, and like, you know, just not, you know, like not staking too much in fame and ambition and prestige, but just kind of like a humble, modest thing, living, and then quiet life. And then another part of her saw this other side, which like could be a teacher or that, or, you know, like a kind of a mix, or this, or where she could travel the world and all this stuff, and like this, and another branch leafing out where she could be not even a writer at all, maybe just not even doing anything creative at all, but, you know, just, you know, living and just being present, and maybe just paying attention only day by day. And those are, you know, I really resonate with that too, because because not only just being somewhat young myself, I mean, I don't know how long I'll have that excuse anymore, but just having that kind of, that I do definitely, and I heard a lot of other people resonated a lot with this line as well, because there's so many different, I can see personally too, like so many different like division, like so many different, not necessarily contrasting world, you know, like possibilities, but just like so many different opportunities and things, and it's like Kierkegaardian kind of angst that we all have. Like, it's like we could, you know, there's so many different possibilities, like, and especially in a postmodern world where there's like possibilities tied to possibilities, and like decisions, this stuff, and like to the point where if you don't do anything, it's like John Paul Sartre, like even if you don't, like even if like you are torn between wanting to like serve your country and like stay home and like look after your sickly mother, like even in either one of those, like they're equally valid. Like there's no, because, you know, like that's existentialism, like there's no objective overall like teleological end of the universe. So that's kind of like a thing with me, is like I've chosen a few things, and I've chosen, stuck with the thing, and my thing, I guess, is like a personal thing, is like I'm trying to kind of live out multiple of those things to my own detriment. Like I'm trying to spread myself too thin, and that I'm seeing, well, I want, part of me wants to you know, travel the world, and I've done a tiny bit of that, I've tasted that, but I haven't like fully, you know, gone all, you know, across all the continents yet. I've you know, I've only braved one or two, I've only braved two continents, but yeah, I've loved to just go, you know, completely no holds barred, just travel, you know, and a part of me wants to go, like, be maybe a teacher in the future, but I don't have the right credentials. I'm not sure if I'll be able to do that, but just a modest teacher. And another part of me wants to do, like, I totally get that. Like, I totally get that. All the different kind of possibilities you can reap, and like you can put things into, and you can put work into, and I could do the thing. I could just have a family, and I could just child rear, and that would be equally valid. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not like there's any less. I'm not looking down on anybody just because they don't do that, because I've seen that the route in me doing, maybe just focusing on this, you know, I'm gonna focus on this writing thing, I'm gonna focus on reading and just doing music, and that's kind of it. But even doing that, like, I can see the downside, that there's like I'm less maybe geared towards having a family, because I'm kind of, now that I've dug myself into with this, I'm kind of like, I feel like my family is kind of like already the creations that I've made, either with writing or reading, or, you know, I feel like the greatest relationships I have are with books, kind of, not to say, you know, like I have no outside external friends or anything like that, but it's like, it's just like, as far as like, you know, marriage and you know, stuff like that, it seems like kind of like a long way off, and I feel that pain that Plath was talking about through Esther Green. So yeah, there's also another part, like right off in the beginning, where she in the first, it's kind of a cold opening, where she says, it was a queer, sultry summer, the summer that they electrocuted the Rosenbergs, meaning Ethel and I believe is Julian Rosenberg. I want to say that was the mid 1950s, like 1953, I think. And I only know that because I just did a little bit of research. Like, it's a couple days ago, and I watched like a kind of mini few minute doc on it about the Rosenbergs actually friends, their relatives were trying to get kind of an Obama. I guess this was like years back when Obama was still in president, but they were trying to get him to kind of pardon, or to try to, I think, but but anyway, but yeah, the Rosenbergs were a famous kind of example of during the Red Scare when McCarthyism was just, and I don't know way too much about this, but it was like so rampant, and they were like just hounding down anything. So like they were like Soviet spies, like anything, and the Rosenbergs were basically just accused of, mind you, just accused of transferring information or like getting like information for like nuclear codes or warfare or something like that, to like bombs and weapons of mass destruction, and they were basically accused of being complicit in that, and then that was enough for them to be tried on on the, I don't know if this is like the national, I guess, federal court kind of Supreme Court, or whether it was just like a kind of the federal government kind of all despite the fact that the national, like the democratic kind of motion for like statewide, or I'm sorry, nationwide, was not unanimously, but was like just enough in favor of them being appealed. So you have this idea of like democracy being kind of like spat in the face, and I get it, democracy, if it isn't always the best route, and it's not always like the best route, because if you have democracy, a ship of fools, like Plato talked about, like you have all these different people, kind of in that analogy, kind of steering and like arguing and bickering, and they're not actually making anything. They're just kind of like circuitously going in, like just going in circles. They're not actually. That's if you have fools piling the ship of a republic, for example. But if you have actual kind of like educated philosopher kings, as Plato would call, and I'm not sure how much I agree with that. I mean, it was a different time, but anyway, so that was a way off the deep end with that. But like the Rosenbergs, I guess, it was. I still think it was like totally. The least they could have gotten was just like life in prison or something, or like even that I thought would be extreme measures. But like they were just really trying to make a point of them, so they electrocuted them. And she says, "I didn't know what I was doing in New York. I'm stupid about executions. The idea of being executed makes me sick, and that's all there was to be read about in the papers. Goggle-eyed headlines staring up at me at every street corner in the fusty, peanut-smelling mouth of every subway. It had nothing to do with me, but I couldn't help but wondering what it would be like being burned alive all along your nerves. I thought it must be the worst thing in the world. New York was bad enough. By 9 in the morning, the fake country wet freshness that somehow seeped in overnight evaporated over the tail end of the sweet dream, mirage gray at the bottom of the granite canyons. The hot streets wavered in the sun, and the car tops sizzled and glittered in the dry, cindery dust blew into my eyes and down from my throat. I kept hearing about the Rosenbergs over the radio and at the office till I couldn't get them out of my mind. It was like the first time I saw a cadaver. For weeks afterwards, the cadaver's head, or what was left of it, floated up behind my eggs." So, yeah, that's kind of just a taste of what, was going through her mind. And I identify with that too, like this idea of there's such a weird pressure where we have like the media and like the kind of the mode of the way we get our information is very dark a lot of the times. Like you hear nothing about killings and wars, and with the latest thing is the Israel and Hamas, and it's just like it seems like every single freaking day it's another kidnapping, it's another execution, it's another awful horrible thing, or it's like inhumane, obviously, to say the least, about what they do and the measures that people use. And it's just like it's always being bombarded at us, and it's like if you're already sensitive and if you're already prone to take that stuff in, and that stuff like doesn't bode well with you, and it makes you think about death, and it makes you think about that stuff. And I've had to that too, like going into the abyss of just like doing certain things where I'm like partially for my novel, kind of a little bit like doing like little deep research kind of dives, and like hearing about certain videos of like executions or snuff films, and hearing about that stuff, and just reading about it is just enough. But like just going down that route is like it's very like a double-edged sword, because you're gleaning something about yourself and like the way you react to stuff, and you're learning about, you're like, oh shit, this is what human nature is capable of. This is what the extent of brutality and like like the gruesome nature of that, like this is what we're all capable of. And then meanwhile it's like that's like who knows, like these are the only things that have made it on leaked online and everything, and like and all that. And it's like a curiosity, and it's like kind of a Nietzschean kind of delving too far into the abyss. So that's the kind of thing I get, is that I'm like trying to like, yes, you do learn something about yourself, and you're like, okay, well, now I'm kind of better equipped, or not, like I feel like not equipped, but like I feel like doing that, like you're like, okay, well, now or nothing I do is like I love human life more. I think like I walk away from hearing about that stuff like wanting to be a better person. I think just despite them, I guess, for any other reason. And I think like there's another part where this kind of, like but another part is like there is like a way of going too deep into it and like hearing too much about, there's like too much of it, like it becomes like an overstimulation, I guess, of like hearing about stuff and like being bombarded with all that information, like Esther was. And it's like that really like sticking to you, and it like plastering to your mind. And there's a way of it, like like that's like with when you have depression, like that kind of it's cyclical, it's like a thing that it doesn't make any sense. And I think in Elizabeth Wurtzel's Prozac Nation, there's like quite a lot of similarities, also in the fact that it's like a semi-autobiographical, I'd say that's probably more autobiographical straight, Wurtzel's book. But I'd also say it's more memoir slash, it draws, like, she went through similar things too, like electroshock therapy and all that. So like it just, this idea that there's, and that too, like about I wonder how intentional that was, like that kind of similarities between, was there an analogy to be drawn from her talking about electrocutions of the Rosenbergs to her own electroshock therapy, and like these two different kinds of, like almost like electric shock being used for healing, and then another kind for like, it's almost like a dose makes the poison kind of idea that I find fascinating as well. This but yeah, there's a lot to be drawn from this novel. It's like so many different layers, and I've got to reread it. I've got to read it again sometime. But because it has been, I want to say like 4 years almost. So yeah, there's as you go through the novel, she feels more and more like aimless as time goes on. It's like she feels it really goes like full, blown into that, like no, nothing left to the imagination kind of, this the way she describes it, like when she's like stuck in the hospital, and like this inertia that of being, and that's where the bell jar comes from. That the title is that, the bell jar is actually a metallic kind of lining over top of the lamp that, I think it's for particularly hospital lamps. So it's like that is like a weirdly poetic but kind of foreboding kind of look, because it's like it's that kind of static light, electricity again, like that kind of that something that it's like you kind of need to see, and it's like, yeah, it's also this artificial kind of light that is very like I don't know if it's like a tungsten kind of thing or it's fluorescent or whatever, but yeah, it's like this idea that too much of one thing, I think. But yeah, there's so many different themes going on, like in the hospital. She actually kind of ironically finds one of her friends, Joanne, I think. She ends up oddly enough at the same hospital. She's like an old childhood friend, I think. And then, but yeah, there's and I think her friend Doreen too, her best friend. They both go out buddy too, and they both kind of like, like they both kind of like him, and they hold him in good regard. But as time goes on, though, there's like she's basically kind of losing a will, kind of like, it's like things are getting like smaller and more confined, and she's like, it goes like deep into that depression, that to clinical, completely nothing, left at all whatsoever to live for kind of depression. Like, it's like going through, and I thank God I've never been through that kind, but this horrible, harrowing way, torture, because it's like, it really is like, it like makes no sense if you think about it. Like, intuitively there would be no reason for depression to exist, like, if you think about it, because it makes no sense in an evolutionary Darwinian way, as little as I know about that too, but like, it doesn't make any sense. Why do we get depressed? Why do we feel like, is it, and I don't think it is like just it's just people are too much on their phones, or just, I think it's deeper than that. I think it's something to do with like just a part of it, for me at least, is a sheer kind of just lack, or sheer kind of knowing. It's like a lack of, it's like a angst, I think. It's like an angst of knowing either too much or not knowing enough, and like a slippery slope kind of thing, or not knowing, stuff, what to do, or like what decision to make. That's a big thing, because like life fulfilling, really life defining decisions, there's so many of them. Like, you could make them like literally at the drop of a hat. People make these decisions and they don't think, but for me it's different. Like, I have to think about that, and maybe it's not so strange, I guess, but yeah, there's a lot. And there's another part that really struck with me too. Like, I think Esther's character was talking about like the way, and it's all narrated by her, obviously, so you get like kind of a first person glance into her world, and she mentioned something about like being looking at like those like old archival film footage, I think, of like the reels, I believe, of like of people that were being, I think, almost like census kind of type of stuff, like ordained by the government, like a kind of archival footage that would like take nude pictures of people, like just for the sake of putting their name in like a thing, and like having for like almost like a scientific inquiry kind of thing of just having their name. And for some reason that I knew what she was talking about when she said that, because I think I've stumbled across like similar things, and like I felt like similarly like weirded out by that, because they were like stripped of their identity too. Like, they're just like stripped of their clothes, like there's no shame, and they're just like basically, I mean, it's not like Holocaust level stuff quite. I mean, it's like, it's pretty weird, but it's not like quite that bad. But it is a kind of thing that just like one of those things that really makes you like unsettled, kind of. So yeah, there's that. And then she, I would say towards the end of the novel, she's like, there's, I think, a pregnancy, or she thinks she's almost like, she mistakes herself for being pregnant, I think, but it's like kind of like, it gets so to the point where like you can't tell it's real anymore. But it's not like magic realism. It's not like anything, like, it's not like, you're seeing like talking heads, or or talking rabbits, or like, or like Disney animals, or anything. Like, it's not that, but it is, stuff like a heightened reality, and stuff that she's kind of not present in her body, I guess, and like not really feeling or knowing like what's, like how time passes too, and like the fact that she isn't pregnant at the end of it, but it's like she's going through a lot of different things, where it's like confusing, similar to what happens to Britain Prozac Nation too, kind of, where she actually, I think Virgil has a child, I think, that actually ends up having a miscarriage, but like in this case it's I think Esther doesn't end up pregnant though. I think it's like a thing where she like mistakes all these different conflicting bodily kind of mental irks in court, all these different things in these thoughts for being kind of like, and kind of misaligns them with reality. So yeah, I think that's all I have for today with the Belly Jar. Definitely recommend it. Hopefully I didn't give too much away, although I think you've come to know that at this time I pretty much, if you're watching my reviews, you're probably going to be in for a spoiler, so that's just kind of a given thing. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.